So I'm going to read chapter one, and remember to think about the themes, rhetorical devices, and motifs as you read. Chapter one. I was born in Tuckahoe, near Hillsborough, and about 12 miles from Easton in Talbot County, Maryland. I have no accurate knowledge of my age, never having seen any authentic record containing it. By far, the larger part of the slaves know as little of their ages as horses know of theirs, and it is the wish of most masters within my knowledge to keep their slaves thus ignorant. I do not remember to have ever met a slave who could tell of his birthday. They seldom come nearer to it than planting time, harvest time, cherry time, springtime, or fall time. A want of information concerning my own was a source of unhappiness to me even during childhood. The white children could tell their ages. I cannot tell why I ought to be deprived of the same privilege. I was not allowed to make any inquiries of my master concerning it. He deemed all such inquiries on the part of a slave improper and impertinent and evidence of a restless spirit. The nearest estimate I can give makes me now between 27 and 28 years of age. I come to this from hearing my master say, sometime during 1835, I was about 17 years old. So at the end of each paragraph, I'd like for you to kind of pause, look back, and try to come up with, okay, what is he telling us in this paragraph? What is the purpose of it? What did we learn? So what did we learn about him and a lot of slaves from this paragraph? What didn't they know, and why didn't they know it? And how are they treated when they wanted to know? All right, paragraph 2. My mother was named Harriet Bailey. She was the daughter of Isaac and Betsy Bailey, both colored and quite dark. My mother was of a darker complexion than either my grandmother or grandfather. So that's the end of paragraph 2. And if you look at there's 7 paragraphs in this chapter. And if you look at how small this chapter is, why is it so small? Why does that get its own paragraph? What is he telling us about? Paragraph 3. My father was a white man. He was admitted to be such by all I ever heard speak of my parentage. The opinion was also whispered that my master was my father. But of the correctness of this opinion I know nothing. The means of knowing was withheld from me. My mother and I were separated when I was but an infant, before I knew her as my mother. It is a common custom in the part of Maryland from which I ran away, to part children from their mothers at a very early age. Frequently, before the child has reached its 12th month, its mother is taken from it and hired out on some farm a considerable distance off, and the child is placed under the care of an old woman too old for field labor. For what this separation has done, I do not know, unless it is to hinder the development of a child's affection towards its mother, and to blunt and destroy the natural affection of the mother for the child. This is the inevitable result. So this 30 is there for no reason. So what is this paragraph about? It talks about his father, right? So who is his father? Does he know? Why doesn't he know? Or does he? And then he talks about what happens to him between him and his mother. So what happens? And why does it happen? What is his guess? Why does he think that slave owners do this? Do you agree or disagree? Does it make sense? At the end, he says, this is the inevitable result. So what is the inevitable result? What happens because children are taken away from their mothers? Paragraph 4. I never saw my mother to know her as such, more than 4 or 5 times in my life. And each of these times was very short in duration and at night. She was hired by a Mr. Stewart who lived about 12 miles from my home. She made her journey to see me in the night, traveling the whole distance on foot after the performance of her day's work. She was a field hand, and a whipping is the penalty of not being in the field at sunrise, unless a slave has special permission from his or her master to the contrary, a permission which they seldom get, and one that gives to him that gives it the proud name of being a kind master. I do not recollect of ever seeing my mother by the light of day. She was with me in the night. She would lie down with me and get me to sleep. But long before I waked, she was gone. Very little communication ever took place between us. Death soon ended what little we could have while she lived, and with it, her hardships and suffering. She died when I was about 7 years old on one of my master's farms near Lee's Mill. I was not allowed to be present during her illness, at her death, or burial. She was gone long before I knew anything about it. Never having enjoyed, to any considerable extent, her soothing presence, her tender and watchful care, I received the tidings of her death with much the same emotions I should have probably felt at the death of a stranger. So in paragraph 4, we've already lost his mom, right? She's already gone. And how did it affect him? And why did it affect him or not affect him the way that maybe it would affect us? And maybe that goes back to paragraph 3, right? The reason they're separated. Paragraph 5. Called thus suddenly away, she left me without the slightest intimation of who my father was. The whisper that my master was my father may or may not be true. And, true or false, it is of but little consequence to my purpose, whilst the facts remained in all its glaring odiousness, that means grossness, that slaveholders have ordained, and by law established, that the children of slave women shall in all cases follow the condition of their mothers. And this is done too obviously to administer to their own lusts and make a gratification of their wicked desires profitable as well as pleasurable. For by this cunning arrangement, the slaveholder, in cases not a few, sustains to his slave the double relation of master and father. So this law that they're talking about, that the children of slave women shall in all cases follow the condition of their mothers, this is why Harriet Jacobs' children, even though their father was white, and for all intents and purposes, loved them. They were still slaves, and he couldn't have them. And this kind of explains why. It says this is done obviously to administer to their own lusts. Remember, and we talked about lust when we were doing the crucible. So this is like the sexual desires that they have. So they're having sex with these slave women, and then when these slave women have children, they're slaves. And they're slaves that these owners didn't have to pay for. All right. I'm going to pause here and let those of you who'd like to finish reading on your own, finish reading on your own. And everyone else, I will post another link with the rest of the story. All right. Love you guys. Bye.